Good morning. Welcome to another day 40 actually, of the Whole50 Bible study. So grateful that you are back with us for another day as we continue on through 50 days of a more holistic approach to our spiritual health. It's hard to believe that we are now 4/5 or I guess 80% of the way through this study. Today, we are continuing in Hebrews chapter 12 as we now look at the second part of the study that we began yesterday on day 39. But before we get there, just a couple of things to remind you of. I'm going to be up in Cleveland this Sunday at 11 o'clock on May 16th. Looking forward to meeting you there at Willoughby at Daniels Park at the Pavilion, the East Pavilion. It's just going to be a low-key good time getting to get to meet each other, talk with each other. I'll be speaking on the passage for that day. Bring a short devotional. We'll do a little bit of singing, a little bit of laughing. We'll receive communion. I think there's even going to be food available because, well, if your ministry is called Christ Table, there needs to be food, right? And I look forward to having you there. And I hope that you're able to come and join us. But for everybody, not just Northeastern Ohio, these books have been packaged thanks to an incredible volunteer, and they are going into the mail today. So this truly is your last opportunity to get one of those boxes with the Bible study that's starting May 24th. It is called Party On. We're going to look at the parties in the Bible, the food, the feasting, the fellowship, and some really fun places in Scripture. It is going to be a really fun Bible study, a great opportunity for us to look at portions of Scripture that we don't usually look at because we don't usually talk about food or fun when we talk about the Bible. And so I hope that you'll join us on that. Love to send that to you absolutely free, along with a couple of gifts that are going to be in that box as well. And I'm sending it free to all the donors of Christ Table today. And you can donate by going to the website. And if you do that right now or this morning, then you'll actually be able to get in right under the wire. We've got a few extra boxes packed. Just throw a label on it, get it out to you. And if you're not able to donate, don't let that stop you. Let me know. And I'll make sure to get one to you anyway. But without any further delay, why don't we go ahead and jump into Hebrews chapter 12. Hebrews is it's a difficult book. Now, you might not know that by looking at Hebrews chapters 11 and chapters 12 because they're a little tame, but Hebrews is a tough book. And today, the topic that we're looking at is, it's a little difficult, maybe. It will be a little difficult for some of us to process and to handle. I wasn't initially going to read through all of the passage that we have on tap for today. It's only 12 verses, but I wasn't going to read through all of it. But I actually think that I will. Now, if you were here with us yesterday, what we spoke about was kind of this hall of fame in Hebrews that lists Noah, Abram, Sarah, Samson, Isaac, Jacob, Abel. These incredible people who did amazing things because of their extraordinary faith. But one of the things that we learned was that oftentimes they did not see the fulfillment of the promises that God gave them, even within their lifetime. Abraham, for instance, was promised great land, but when he died, all that he owned was the plot of ground that his wife was buried in. So maybe sometimes in our life we have too small a vision or a timeline of how God is going to come through with the things that he's promised for us. And then we talked a little bit about so many people in the church history who aren't even named, but who did extraordinary things because of their extraordinary faith. And so that's where we pick up today as we continue on in the reading. Now, a reminder, originally when the Bible was written, there were no chapters or verses. And so these two passages, yesterday's and today's, would have come hand in hand with each other without a break. So Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1. Therefore, so he's essentially tying it to all that he said before in yesterday's study. Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a huge crowd of witnesses to the life of faith. So he's saying all of these people, Abram, Noah, Sarah, Isaac, Samson, David, Solomon, and all of these unnamed people who tamed lions, who led armies, who stood up for their faith and were burned at the stake and killed by the sword for all of these things. All of these people who have gone on before, who are great saints and had extraordinary faith, are surrounding you. Think about that. They are, and the picture here is a Roman Colosseum. They are surrounding you now, cheering you on your journey of faith. They had their leg of the race, but now they are surrounding you, cheering for you, giving you hope, giving you strength, giving you prayer and perseverance as you now run the leg of your faith race. So throw off the weights that you've been training with. Don't let yourself be slowed down by other things. This is game time. It's time for you to be at your best. This isn't practice. This is the real thing, this life now that you are living. Especially the sin that so easily trips us up. Throw those things off, those things that are slowing you down, that are getting in your way, that are burdens to you. Get rid of those things. Get rid of that sin. It is going to trip you up. You're going to stumble. You're going to fall in this race, and you don't want to be struggling out there on the playing field. Let us run with endurance, or the way it was taught to me, patience as a child, or perseverance that God has set before us. God has laid out this path for you. So run it, but run it with endurance. Recognize that this isn't a sprint. This life of faith is more like a marathon. You've got to pace yourself for the long haul. You've got to do what it takes in order to make sure that you run the race well, and that you cross the finish line in such a way that is not just honoring to God, but honoring to you. We do this. How do we do that? We do this by keeping our eyes on Jesus. If not, you're gonna lose heart. You're gonna forget why you are struggling through all of this suffering, why you've done all of this work. And, whenever you are competing in something, whenever you're trying to attain something, you always want to remember why you're doing it. A few years ago, I changed my lifestyle to try to become healthier, lost about 100 pounds, started being intentional about working out. That became a spiritual act of worship for me. And the real motivating factor for me doing that was so that I'd live long enough to be able to enjoy my kids' childhood. I realized if I continued on the path that I was, I either wasn't going to make it through to see them into adulthood and out of the house, or I wasn't going to be able to do all the things that a dad should be able to do. And so I changed my lifestyle. So that was my goal. And so now when people reach out to me and say, how did you do it? What advice do you have for me? The biggest piece of advice that I have is you've got to know your why. You've got to know your why, and your why has to be compelling enough, not just to keep you through those first few weeks. It's got to be compelling enough to still be a challenge for you a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road. And people who don't have a why, I don't give much advice to, because they're not going to keep up with it. And this is what's being said here is Jesus is your why. He's your why. Keep your eyes on him whenever things get difficult in life, in the race, in the battle that you're fighting each and every day. Jesus is your why. Keep your eyes on him. He is the champion who initiates and perfects, or another way to say that is the starter and finisher, the author and completer. He's there at the beginning of the race, and he's going to be there at the end of the race. And he's already run the race really for you. He's the champion. He's done all of the hard work. Because of the joy awaiting him, he endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and now he's seated in the place of honor beside God's throne. beside God's throne? What's the joy that awaited him? I think the joy that awaited him is you. I think that that's what that reference is there. The joy that awaited him wasn't being seated at a place of honor beside God's throne. He already had a place of honor beside God's throne. It wasn't because he had some masochistic, sadistic desire to endure suffering or to endure the cross. In fact, he asked, God pleaded with God in Gethsemane that God wouldn't make him go through the pain of the cross. It wasn't that he wanted to be shamed. He hung on a cross naked. All of those paintings that you see of Jesus where he's wearing a loincloth, he hung on the cross naked. Part of the crucifixion was humiliation. That's what's in view here when it says despised its shame. He did those things for one singular joy, and that one singular joy was you and getting to watch you and help you run your race. Think of all of the hostility that Jesus endured from sinful people. Then you won't become weary and give up. If you are enduring hostility from sinful people, don't give up. I know you're weary. Jesus knows you're weary. He endured the same thing. Think about all that he endured. And you have his strength. You have him and all of these people on the sidelines watching you, cheering you on. They are your strength in those moments where you don't have any. After all, you've not yet given your lives up in your struggle to sin. You may have stumbled a few times. You may have tripped up. Sin may have slowed you down, may have sidetracked you for a while and gotten you off the path, but you've not given up yet. You're still in it. So be in it to win it. And have you forgotten the encouraging words that God spoke to you as his children? And notice that word children. He said, my child, don't make light of the Lord's discipline, and don't give up when he corrects you. You see, part of what I've realized watching my kids play sports is their coaches correct them. Their coaches discipline them. And yet, my kids love their coaches. Now, some of them they don't, but the coaches whom they don't love are the ones who don't love them, who are only in it to win it, who are only in it for the game, but not for their best. But the coaches that my kids love, they will take any discipline, they will take any correction, they will take any extended practice. They'll sit on the bench just because they know that that coach loves them and is in it for their best, and they feel a part of a team. This is what's being said here, that God to us is like a best coach or like a best parent. So don't take God's discipline lightly, and don't give up when he corrects you. Don't give up whenever God says, you know what? You need to maybe do a little bit more practice, do a little bit more work. You might need to be a little bit more intentional about your spiritual life. You know, you may be taking your eyes off of Jesus and watching too many other people. You're doing this. You're doing this wrong. You actually could do. You have it in you to do this better. Put your eyes on Jesus. Take off the weight of all those sins that are slowing you down, and run. Run this race. And when you get corrected, don't give up. God disciplines those he loves. God corrects those people whom he believes in, and he believes in you. And he punishes each one he accepts as his child. Now that word punish, I don't love that word. But I think what's in view here is that God, when he loves you, corrects you. Just like I do my kids. And it doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good for either of us. But sometimes it's what's needed. And when you endure those things that are needed, that divine discipline, that divine correction, remember that God is treating you as his own children. And whoever heard of a father who's never disciplined, or whoever heard of a child who's never disciplined by its father? Well, maybe we've all heard of that. And maybe that was the point of the writer. We've all heard of that, is to say, whoever heard of a child that wasn't disciplined by his father? And yeah, back here in the back, I've heard of a child that wasn't disciplined by their parents. And yeah, I know how that turned out. The difficult part of this, though, is that many of us maybe had fathers who overcorrected, who over-disciplined, or there wasn't love along with that correction. And so we have a real sore spot when we think about God as Father. And I'm sorry. I am so sorry for that. And God is too. You know, this is why this spiritual life is so important. It's because we have to get it right so that we reflect God well. And if you had a father or had a mother who over-disciplined, over-corrected, or didn't do so out of love, or who hurt you, or who harmed you, they were not reflecting the discipline or the love of God. And that was their responsibility to do that, to be a stand-in, to be a steward, to be a placeholder for God in your life. And they failed. And that is not God's fault. And that is not your fault. And so I think that while passages like this, whenever we speak of God as Father and disciplining, for many of us are super difficult passages because we don't have a positive example of what that looks like. I think it's important for us to step back and say, we can be now that positive example. We can break that cycle of that generational sin. But we can also understand that just because we didn't have a healthy example of that doesn't mean that God can't be for us a healthy example of that. I heard a book title once that I thought was a brilliant book title. I had no father but God. It was because this individual grew up without a father, and so God was his father. And I think that really sticks out to me as the idea that if your father or mother failed you as an example of faith or as an example of God, then we have to reorient those words and those ideas in our estimation and in our minds and allow God to teach us the way that it was supposed to be. And so Hebrews continues in verse 8, if God doesn't discipline you as he does all of his children, it means that you're illegitimate and are not really his children at all. So because he sets boundaries and helps guide you into those boundaries that are healthy, means that you're his child and means that he loves you. So if you're suffering, if you're having a difficult time, if you feel like God has slapped you on the hand a little bit in order to protect you from something that was harming you, it's tough, but be thankful. Be grateful. Since we respected our earthly fathers who disciplined us, shouldn't we submit even more to the discipline of the Father of our spirits and live forever? God's saying if we had a healthy example, or if you have a healthy example as a father or as a coach or as somebody else in your life whom you respected but who corrected you, then why are you getting up in arms whenever God does that? You shouldn't. Shouldn't you submit even more to him? For our earthly fathers disciplined us for a short time, for a few years. And maybe this is maybe this is the line right here that allows us to move on from the pain of some of that correction and discipline, doing the best they knew how. It's not letting them off the hook, but maybe they were doing the best that they could. And yeah, maybe they should have done better, right? But maybe they were doing the best that they could. And hopefully your children will see that as well in those moments where you've failed, where you've faltered, where you allowed sin to weigh you down and burden you down, where you took your eyes off of Jesus and put it on something else, and your kids saw that. Maybe you were doing the best that you knew how. But God's discipline is always good for us, so that we might share in His holiness, so that you might be better. No discipline is enjoyable when it's happening, right? Can I get an amen? It's painful. It sucks. It hurts. No one likes it. No one wants it, especially perfectionists like me. Try to avoid it at all costs. And when it comes, it's just, really, God? But afterward, there will be a peaceful harvest of right living for those who are trained in this way. Think of the reward. Think of what comes whenever you have learned how to live well, to live rightly, and to live in a God-honoring way. Think of that gift that's given not just to yourself, but to your children, to your family, to your spouse, to all of those around you. So, take a new grip with your tired hands and strengthen your weak knees. I love that picture. Pick up that baseball bat. Pick up that tennis racket. Pick up that oar. Pick up that barbell. Strengthen your weak knees. Get back up. Pick up the tools of your faith and start moving forward. There is a coliseum filled with thousands of people who are cheering you on. And the person who is seated in the place of honor in that coliseum is Jesus Himself. And He believes in you. And He knows that you can run this race well, maybe a little better than you are right now, and that's okay. You're doing the best you can. I think he sees more. Just keep moving. Just keep your eyes on Him, and you'll cross the finish line. And we'll all be better for it. Until tomorrow, happy reading.